All right, everybody, and welcome back to Lions Guide. And on today's episode, we have Mrs. Jessica Collier, who is a high school math teacher, but not just any high school math teacher. Actually, Jessica's name was passed on to me by a friend and Marine, and kind of talked about how she just finished a 100-mile run. And I was like, dude, can I reach out to her? And because I wanted to get you on, man, it's an amazing thing. I'm actually unofficially, this is my first unofficial announcement. I'm going to try to run a 100-miler in December. So I'm super intrigued to pick your brain about it, but even more so, hear your story and learn how you got here, where you came from, and all that. So, welcome to the show, and give us a 30-second version of who you are and what you do.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Yes, I am a high school math teacher. I've been teaching for 13 years here in Queen Anne's County. I grew up in Pasadena in Anne Arundel County, so always really been in Maryland, except when I went to college in Pennsylvania, which is where I actually started running, which was a very hilly, awesome terrain to run on. I was actually a scholarship softball player there and played softball my entire life from age 8 to 21. I was playing travel ball, playing softball nonstop. So I wasn't running like crazy then, but yes, I've now been running. I would say I've been an adamant runner now for about 14 years. I did my first marathon in 2010 officially, but throughout my years before that, I was kind of running marathons and not really knowing it. I did take a little bit of a break from marathons for a couple years to have kids, but I now got back into marathon running again about 3 years ago after my youngest was born. And now I started doing ultras and it's my newfound obsession. So not only am I excited to share my experience, I'm excited to like kind of debrief on it myself too. Cause I mean, I've been journaling about it and talking to some of my runner friends, but there's never enough conversation about it. So I think it's an awesome thing for anyone just to try. I mean, it's impressive just seeing the people that go out there and start these races. And there's a lot of people that try time after time after time, and they're not training properly for it. And a lot of it's because there's so much out there you can see. And all those things that are out there are not really from necessarily one person's experience. They're combining all these experiences. So it's good to kind of hear. And I'd like to share like my experience and my thoughts and different ideas of not just like what you should do, but what you should think about and like consider, because it's things that people always are looking for, though, a easy 5-step guide, and that's not how it is. That's not how life is. So I mean, running to me and teaching are really just life. They are very connected. My students will tell you, and I'm sure some of my students are going to watch this and they'll laugh and comment, because I connect everything back to running. So when I'm teaching, the kids are being silly or complaining about something, I'll have some kind of running analogy or working out analogy that's like their solution. And that's kind of the way that my whole purpose of teaching and sharing my experience of running also is just really to inspire kids to be their best. And so it's not disconnected as much as it might sound that I am a runner and a teacher, because it really does go together for me. And I think anyone who's had me or knows me knows that that's kind of like, it's a big holistic picture, not just, and also for my own kids, because we talk a lot about, what it takes, and they see what it takes. And it's a cool experience just all around.
Yeah, no, it is, and and I appreciate what you're saying, that even the training, right? It I want to say, like, because I've run 6 marathons myself, and I think you train for it, of course, but I can't say like it makes the event easier. It makes you
Mhm.
perform better, but it's still tough. Like, it's still really a
Mhm.
tough challenge. So it's not like
Oh,
you do it until it's so easy that you can just do it. It's You're training for your result, but it's not easier. Like, it's I don't know if it's making sense, but it's
no, it does. That's one of my favorite quotes is, you don't train so that it's easy, or you don't train so that it doesn't hurt. You train so that you're used to the hurt.
mm,
You train, you put yourself through it so that on race day, nothing can surprise you.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And so rewinding a little bit, so how when you grew up, so did you grow up in like small town environment, or what was life like for you? You played softball, traveled. Was it life? Softball is life. Life is softball. Like, what was your growing up experience like?
Absolutely. Definitely softball was life. I vividly remember many things being depending on softball. As a matter of fact, really weird, random story, but I didn't get my ears pierced until I was in college because my parents told me I couldn't get my ears pierced until I was a teenager and I could take care of them. And well, by the time I was 13, which is the day my sister turned 13, she got her ears pierced. But when I turned 13, I was playing softball so busily that I was playing softball all season, all year round. I didn't have time to get my ears pierced because if I was going to get my ears pierced, I'd have to take them out for a game and they'd close up. And then it was a
Mm.
matter of, and if I do get my ears pierced, then I got to spend money on earrings. I'd rather spend money on a new softball bat or, new softball outfit. So it was definitely, it just shows that like softball was my life. I actually went to Towson University for a semester because I had kind of gone away from the idea that I wanted to play softball in college. I was like, okay, I'm going to make my decision to go to college based on what I want to do with my life, not softball. And I had a couple different scholarship offers, like out of state places, but I was like, no, I'm going to try out, just go into a cheap local school and get the degree I wanted to get, because at the time I wanted to be an athletic trainer. And to do that, to get a degree from a bigger university is actually better. So I learned that and I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. Couple months into going to Towson, I missed softball so much. I went and tried out for the Towson team, and they're a Division I school. And they told me basically, yeah, you can come play with us, but you're not going to see much playing time until, you're probably a junior year. And our team's like a job, we have practice this time, this. And I was like, okay, well, let's see what happens. In the meanwhile, I called a couple of the schools that I had talked to before and had scholarships and said, hey, like, I'm going to change my major. Can I come play softball still? So luckily, I did end up getting back up to Seton Hill, where they gave me a little bit of money to make it a little more reasonable, because it was a very small, private, expensive school. And they said, yeah, come up. And I, like I said, changed my major, went up there, started playing softball again, because it was just, I couldn't go without it. Softball was always my thing. And when I got done playing in college, I ended up coaching for a little while here in Queen Anne's. And I'm praying for the day that my girls want to start playing softball. But it was a family thing too. My brother played baseball. All my friends played softball. So it was like, it wasn't just a sport to me. It was just like kind of where I met my best friends. Still to this day, the friends that I keep in touch with are girls I played ball with at some point.
Mm.
3 of my best friends from college I talked to more than I talked to anyone else. We all played together. So it definitely shaped me. I mean, if there was one thing I could say that in childhood, made me the person I am, it's definitely softball. And my dad coached me. So like also changed the bond that we had. And I mean, our town. So it was kind of like Centerville is, is a really suburban area, closer knit. I mean, I could walk to a lot of my friends' houses. I did walk a lot of places. Busy, very busy area. So, I mean, it was shocking to me to move to the Eastern Shore and see how spread out things are. Because when I was in high school, like I said, I could walk to most of my friends' houses. If not, I knew I could drive there two or three different directions to get there. And nobody in our school community lived more than like 15 minutes away. So like here, I'm like, oh, there's kids that drive 45 minutes to get to school. That's insane to me. But it is similar in the like makeup of the people. I think it's a lot of middle class, big families.
You're talking about
And so,
Pasadena itself?
yes.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. I've been over there just for coaching youth football, and it seems like it's very reminiscent, like even going through the area, how it compares to Queen Anne's County, at least, and the people I've met over there and stuff like that. So,
Just a little faster pace.
yeah, yes, definitely. So did you go to college to be a teacher, or were you intending to be something else?
I changed. So when I started going to college, I started to go for athletic training. And then a semester in, I was like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. It was a lot more like technical learning things that I was like, and then talking to the trainers there at the university, they basically told me, the only job you can get coming out of college to be a trainer is like a high school trainer, and you don't make anything. And I was like, well, I had big dreams. I was like, I'm going to be the trainer for the Orioles or Baltimore Ravens. And they were like, yeah, right. Like, you better know somebody. And I was like, yeah. So like, I guess I kind of came down to earth more and actually thought more about what I was doing. And I was I was taking a math class that was like math for sciences. And the professor was like a, average big school professor that was just like, I don't really care about these kids. I'm just teach. And I liked math. Math always came easy to me. So I was just like teaching other kids in the class and made friends teaching. And I was like, I'm just going to take more math classes because math's fun to me. And like, those were the best classes. It was just going by fast. So I was like, I'm going to be a math major. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it, but I'm going to major in math. And I actually so the next semester I took a calc class at Towson, and I told the professor I was majoring in math, and he laughed at me. He looked at me and was like, what? Why? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, look around. Like in the class, it was like typical, like math looking people, like, not to be stereotypical, but like Asians and like, like math, like people that do math. And I was like, what are you saying? He's like, you're one of two girls in here. I was like, okay. And he's like, what are you going to do with math? I was like, I don't know yet, but I like math and I'm good at it. So I'm going to major in math. So I transferred after that. And when I went up to Seton Hill, I really, I fell in love with math even more because the school was so small. The math major program was there was 15 kids I graduated in the same major. So we all kind of stuck together, worked together. And the professors, it was 3 different professors I had repetitively over the 3 years I was there. And they really actually cared. And, they taught us individually as well as, reflectively. They weren't just throwing the content out there like some places do. So in kind of observing that, I was like, maybe I should be a teacher because I've had all these different experiences with this teacher that tells me no way. And then these teachers that are kind of, showing that they could be better. And when I started there, I actually said, well, maybe I'll go check out some education classes. Cause I had a high school teacher that told me one day, you're going to be a math teacher. And I laughed. I was like, no, but it was the same thing in his class. I used to teach my friends all the time. And my motivation then was if we got done our work, we had 90-minute classes. So if we got done our work, we could sit there and talk and do whatever we wanted. He wasn't going to bother us. So I would sit there, hurry up and teach my friends. We do all the work. And then we'd sit there and goof off and talk to him. And he used to tell me, you're going to be a great teacher one day. And I was like, there's no way I could deal with these kids. And then, as I started thinking about it more, said, I guess I could do this. And now it seems so funny that I never actually thought I would be there because now it seems, I feel like it's really what I was meant to do. Especially in some of the hard times we've had. And, I've thought about, this isn't what I wanted to be. But then when we got back to normal a little bit this year and realized, it's not just about the fact that I'm teaching them math. It's just helping them, especially in teenage years. I had some bad teenage years. So I enjoy being there to, guide the kids a little bit, not just teach them math, but also, teenagers don't want to listen to their parents. So to have other adults that they can, listen to a little bit more and have some kind of conversation with is helpful. And we do, sometimes we'll just randomly go off in conversation, but other times I have little check-ins with them where I try to get the students to talk to me about stuff because I think that's really important. And that was another thing that when I started playing with the idea of teaching, I said, I really want to teach high school because in high school, there was times where I didn't want to talk to my parents, but I could talk to different adults and I had coaches and I had some teachers that I would talk to. But now, more and more, especially I think because of the internet, the kids don't want to talk to adults. And like I said, they never want to talk to their parents. So I kind of pull teeth sometimes, but once it's funny because it's, it's contagious. So a couple of the kids in the class will start opening up to me and other kids are like, you're talking to her like she's a person. And then they'll kind of start doing it too. And so it's cool. And like I said, I talk a lot about running and just me as a person. And they really do, not all of them, but a good deal of them do open up. And I hope that it affects them. Sometimes, you don't always see the fruits of it, but I try to convince myself that it is helping and it can't hurt, I guess, right?
Well, those are the teachers we remember, right? The ones that we had like real talk with, and they were always the cool
Mhm.
teachers, right? But they're really the teachers that I'll say from a leadership perspective, like had influence, because I always kind of look at leadership as like there's leadership and there's influence. And sometimes and often like leadership can be like you're directly in charge of someone. So in a way, a teacher's that, but like they are also not directly in charge of them. They're in charge of like the lessons, and it's kind of up to the student to succeed, right? And so the
Absolutely.
teacher as an influencer, like as indirectly in charge, the ones that still embody good leadership traits, like they treat you like a human, right? They're not just treating you
Mhm.
like a I don't know, they talk down to you, they talk to you, not down to you type of thing. Like those are the teachers that we enjoyed like going through their classes, or we didn't want to miss, or you know what I mean? The ones that you felt like they cared
Mhm.
about you.
Yeah. Yes. And like I said, I just hope. I mean, I've had students that tell me that, but I am all the time, there's some times where I'm just drained. And I just say, I hope that at least one of these kids needed that today. And I've had kids that will come in and just say to me, Miss Collier, I need a break today. Can we just talk? Like, can we not do math? And I'm like, well, let's do a little bit of math and then we'll do this. But it's just for them to say that means something to me. Like, that's telling me, okay, like they feel comfortable here. And so I always tell the students at the beginning of the year, I say, I'm not just here to teach you math. I'm also here to help you be a better person, to teach you to be a person, because unfortunately, the world is not teaching you that anymore. The world is teaching us how to be robots and we
Yeah.
need to be people. So, yeah, so it's definitely something that it's like I look back and I'm just like, I don't know how I got here, but I'm glad I'm here. And it's the same thing with running. Like I said, they go very hand in hand. And it's one of those things that people always like, oh, you always want to be a teacher. Nope. I tell my high school kids, because I was like, I have no idea what I want to do. I was like, you're not going to. And you know what? You might change your mind after you're doing it. There are people who do teach for 20 years and go to another job or do something else and come back. And I always say there's probably other things I could be doing, but I I'm also not running out looking for them, you know?
Right. Right. The
I'd love to be a professional runner and just run all day.
I guess that's a good question. Like, how do you manage, right? So kind of jumping into the running a little bit, like what's your training schedule look like? So sticking with the 100 miler, because that's the biggest run you've run so far, right? And I guess let's tee
Mhm.
that up. When did you do it, and what did training look like for you to get prepared for that?
So I did it 9 days ago, which I'm finally starting to, well, no, I'm feeling human again, but I'm feeling very good again.
Mm,
Um I so actually my training, I guess I'd have to say it started in January, because I did a marathon in April. So what I did was trained for my marathon, which I typically do a 16-week training for my marathon. And then I kind of like tacked onto that to continue into my ultra training. So I took about a week easy off, not off, but a week easy. I had some really bad blisters from my marathon. So I kind of let
mm,
them all clear up. And then I jumped right back into it. So total about 5 months really getting ready for it. But i I can't really say that's all. So I've really truly been pretty well nonstop training for 3 years, minus breaking my foot last spring and taking
mm,
some time off for that. But I can't say that just these 5 months have gotten me ready for it. There's been a lot of things that got me ready for it. I ran a 75-mile, 24-hour race last September. And that was a very good, um, kind of eye-opening experience to it. And it's funny because so I actually ran that race 2 years in a row. I love that race. I'm very sad I'm not doing it this year, but I'm making myself take off because I have all these other races planned. But it's every hour on the hour you start a 5K. And so
mm,
it's a 5K through the woods, and it's a rooted, pretty tricky trail, especially the first year was very muddy. But if you run it at your best pace, I mean, I won first in a couple of them as a female, and that was at like a 28, 29 5K, which is not my fastest 5K, but in the woods, that's pretty good. Then if you walk it, it takes you about 55 minutes. So you don't have to run it or walk it, but the goal is to finish all 24. Well, if you run it, you get a 30-minute break in between. If you walk it, you get no break in between. So the first year, I did it with a team and did it with some friends. And the first year we were all kind of learning, and we learned a lot. And then it was like the next year I was like, okay, I got this. Like, I can do all 24. I had a plan and I stuck to it and ran one, jogged one, walked one, and kind of rotated like that. And the biggest thing was making sure that I was in between doing what I need to do, because I've learned that running and having a half hour in between to sit was horrible for me.
Yeah.
So it was keeping moving during that time, eating a little bit, stretching a little bit. And so that was a very good kind of like, mini look at what it was, because I mean, it wasn't 100 miles, but it was 75, and it was split up over a full 24 hours. So I actually did my 100 in less time. And I knew that. And it was funny because my friends and I, when we were sitting at Pemberton, the 24-hour race, we were talking about, we're like, I bet this is harder than 100 miles, because do 100 straight, probably easier than to have these forced breaks. Now, after I did my 100-miler, I did tell my friend who did both the 24s and me, I said, well, I think we're wrong. 100's definitely harder, but it's a different kind of hard. And I wouldn't say it's that much harder. The last 10 miles is harder than you would think, but it's not, it's very comparable to that 75, 24 hours. And, there's a lot of debate over whether it's harder to run fast or slow, because if you run fast, you get it done faster. So, having a 24-hour race that's spread out and making you have to go so slow does add something to it. But that was, so in training experience, that was a big part of my training, I would say, is that race itself.
Have you fallen in a camp of it's better to get it done or take it slow on that debate?
For the most part, yes.
Where do you stand on it?
To get it done. Yes, to get it done. But at a reasonable level. So one of my favorite mentalities, you'll appreciate this because you're a Marine, is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So not necessarily going fast to get it done, but keeping moving to get it done. Don't slow down and totally dog it. Don't sit down and take a break. Try to keep moving. And with that mentality of, if I keep moving, I'm still working towards the finish, But I've worked very hard at getting fast, and being fast is harder than being slow. Running a marathon at my fastest pace was a different kind of challenging than running 100 miles. It's a lot less of a distance, but it was a very big challenge still. The speed is also different for different people. I'm not a small person. I'm 5'10". If I was a little tiny light little thing running fast, it might be different, but so there's a fine line, I think, between saying, yes, it's better just to get it done and it's better to take it slow. It's like, you have to find that line and tow it, but that's the thing, every race, every experience is really part of my training. So that 24-hour thing was a big training experience. And then in my training, I did other things that aren't just running training. It's about, in your training for a marathon, you're training for a distance, you're training for a time, like I said, I've been working on my speed. So I have done a lot of speed training in my marathon training. And it's a different thing when you're thinking about the length of a time. So when I started training for my ultras, it wasn't about necessarily the time. I was doing that already in my marathon training. They say that's important. So that's why I kind of tacked it onto that. But the idea of going for 24 hours or 20 hours, however long it's going to be, training for that, not necessarily running for that time, but being on the go, being on your feet, having shoes on for 20 hours.
Right.
Because you think about it, in your normal day, how often do you have shoes on all day? And when you do, don't you come home and complain about it? Man, my feet hurt. You got to put your feet up.
So or even being on your feet for that long, right?
Right. Well, there was, and so that's one of the things that it wasn't just, and have told some people this and they think I'm crazy because I'm like, part of my training wasn't just running. It was just having long days. I'd get up and I'd run 20 miles. I'd go out with the kids all day, do stuff with the kids, go to work, stay up late, and then run a couple more miles. So it was about having a full day of stuff that's exhausting you. And then you still have to run. And so I do most of my miles in the morning. I get up pretty early. I go to bed early. I usually get up in between 4 and 4:30 during the school year, and I get running, go to the gym in the morning. There are times where, we're done school at 2:30, 2:50 is our teaching time. But I would go run in between me getting off work and me picking up the kids from daycare sometimes. My husband's wonderful. So one night a week, I always go to hot yoga, and he's always good with the kids that night. And he helps a lot with me trying to make our schedules work. Luckily our schedules work-wise kind of coincided now. So we have time that, if I need to go somewhere, he can be home with the kids and vice versa. So, it really takes a community. So also, like I said, my kids are at daycare. I'll leave them at school or daycare for another extra hour to go run. My mother-in-law and my parents help out. So with the hours that I put into training, it's not just that, it's all, it's not just me doing those workouts. It's also me making sure I can work out the schedule to make it happen. But I do that. And I'm a little crazy with my schedule. I have a calendar that I set up, and I set it up in advance, and I do it. And I've actually done that now for training because I found out how much I actually need that. It's part of the keeping me sane. So now, like when I'm not running these couple weeks to get recovered from that ultra, I have a training schedule, and the same thing. I have my plan set out, and this is what I do. And I do a lot of
does that
cross
mean?
training.
A D training? What does that mean?
I kind of made it up. Well, like it's a thing, I guess. So I have to keep moving. I cannot not work out for more than 2 or 3 days. It's in my head, I know, but it is also, energy wise and emotionally, it's something that keeps me going. So my D training is more yoga, riding the bike, going to the gym and working out, walking. My goal has been walk the dog so many miles because, it's just keeping me moving. And also then my diet too is making sure that I'm eating enough and eating healthy, because after a race like that, you kind of get in this like, oh, I just earned, I'm going to go eat cookies and ice cream because I ran all those calories off. But you really need healthy food to recover, protein and greens to, help your body basically detox from all that lactic acid. So it's a matter of not just training physically, but also, nutrition wise and sleep wise. That's the other thing. You get done a commitment like that where you've been going to bed early and waking up early and working out and eating right. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't have to worry about that. It's really easy to go right down the slippery slope and start eating a bunch of junk and staying up late. And you at this time really can't do that. You shouldn't do that. I've actually learned that from a really bad experience where I tried to stay up all night after a race because I was just on like a adrenaline high. I was like, oh, I'm going to stay up all night. And yeah, my body did not like me for that.
So real quick, you mentioned like you get up, what does your week run schedule look like? So I get it. You get up early, you get up 4:30, you'll get a run in, but like, are you like the traditional marathon training where you're doing some decent runs throughout the week and a longer run on the week? Or like, how did it look for the ultra training? Like, how did that lay out for you?
So I run 5 days a week. During the week, it was typically like a 2 medium-sized, I would say 2 smaller runs, 1 medium-sized run, and then like a tiny run on Friday. So I would do like 5, 5, 10. And the big idea was like for combined miles. So those 3 days would be back to back. So it'd be like 5, 10, 5 or 5, 5, 10 for combined miles. The goal was to have, 20 this week, 30 next week, and kind of build up that chunk of miles. And then Friday have like a 3 mile or a 4 mile run just to kind of like get warmed up. And then Saturday do my long run. And during when I started doing that for the ultra, it was a long run and then like a mini run at night. And then the following day, do a run again. So when I was ultra training, I was running basically 3 days, a day off, 3 days, or 2 days, but like twice a day. So I would either do like a Friday morning, Friday afternoon, Saturday morning, Saturday night, or I would do like a Friday afternoon, Saturday morning, Saturday night, Sunday morning, and then wouldn't do my run again until like Monday afternoon. But I always try to get a day in there for no running where I would either ride the bike, just go for a walk, do something lighter. But during marathon training, when I was running for speed, I did a strict 5 days. I always had 2 days off, but I had like a regular day, it would be miles, like 5-6 miles, and then a speed day, which was anything from tempo runs where, you know, you're warming up and then running at your pace, to Yasos, which are my newfound favorite thing, that are extremely challenging but very fun to do, where you're running intervals basically, sprinting, recovering, and those would go anywhere from 6 to 9 miles during my training. And then after those, I'd always have a day off and then another miles day, and then a big mile. Like you said, my big runs would always be on the weekend, but then I would always take the day after a big run off during marathon training. But when I was started, once I did my marathon, after that, all my long runs, I always did, like, I call it like my cap off run, where the next day I would just try to get some miles. And a lot of people talk about, if you listen to different trainers about different marathon running and ultra running, they talk a lot about trash miles, where you want to avoid trash miles, particularly when you're marathon training, you're trying to train for speed. You don't want miles when your body's not ready. You don't want to go run when you're still exhausted. But there's also people who will say when you run, that's when you need to run the most. And so during my marathon training, when I was working on speed, there was a lot of Mondays where I would not feel like going, but my Monday runs typically had some strides, and I'm going to be at 5 to 6 miles with some sprints in there. And once I got going, I felt good, and I needed that. You know, I had a day off. It's a lot of times after the day off that you feel like you don't need it, but trash miles are bad when you're really looking at pace and when you're trying to recover and get stronger. When you're going for the endurance and the practice of just being tired, which you need, those trash miles aren't trash miles, because they're really just that's really the mental toughness miles you're getting in. Those miles where you're like, man, I already ran 30 miles in the last 24 hours. I'm done. And you realize, no, I got more to give. I can do it. Once you get going, it doesn't hurt at all. I mean, you always should run some at night, because you're going to have to run at night during an ultra. And it's something we don't do enough, especially with the silly headlamp and everything else. It's annoying. You got to do it before you run, because otherwise the day of, you'll let it get in your head too much. So I, like, the week before, actually, I said, you know, I kind of taper a little bit before the race and cut down miles. I said, but I got to get at least 7 in at night. So I ran 15 that morning, and that night, like, had a whole day. And that night I said, okay, 9 o'clock, I'm going to go start running. And I was like, I might do 2 miles. I might just get used to this thing on my head and walk a little bit. Well, I ended up running 8 miles, and I felt great. I didn't want to stop.
Did you see this?
Yes, I did. But so, you know, it's part of that too. It's, it's, you know, getting in the pieces of the training that are mental are so much more important than people realize. It's not just about, you know, yes, it is about the miles and about stretching and recovering from those, but it's also about training your mind that, like, okay, I can do this. This is what this feels like. Yes, I'm tired, but I'm not hurt. I'm fine. I'm good.
Right.
It's, you know, one of the things that I was thinking about earlier this week after the race was, during the race, it's a lot of discussions between your mind and your body, or arguments really between your mind and your body, telling you to stop or to keep going. And your mind is way louder, but your mind is never right. Your mind will make you stop when you don't need to. Your body can do a lot more. And that's one of the reasons I like running so much, because it's a constant, wow, I didn't realize my body could do that, you know?
Well, You made me think when you said you're training to endure, and right, and it's in endurance at it's an endurance race, right? So it makes total sense that
Mhm.
to push through the discomfort of being tired, being sore, and so on. Like that's the point. Like you're actually, like you said, training your mind that no, man, just because we're tired doesn't mean we're done, and we keep pushing through. And yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. I guess how do you sustain, right? So you talked about eating and all that, and that's one of the things, right? Like, are you eating like while you're running? I mean, because I appreciate not eating junk, I get that, but like, if you just use the basic math of you're burning 100 calories per mile, every 3 miles is 300 calories, and that starts to add up
Yeah.
pretty quick. Like, how do you sustain? And even, I guess it's interesting, but I do like it. Like, to go a whole day, like what are you doing to keep the energy up after you go put up, like, a medium run in the morning, and you got a full day, and like how do you sustain?
So a lot of that is definitely experimenting. And that is my number one piece of advice for anyone who ever wants to run, is to try it out before you go to run one of these all day runs. You need to challenge your body to see what your body can eat on the go, and how much. Because see, one of the things that people don't think about is, if you wait until you're hungry, then it's too late.
Mm,
And so people are like, "Oh, well, I'll just eat when I'm hungry." Well, I was never hungry during my 100-mile race. I literally made a plan and stuck to my plan eating wise, because I knew otherwise I wouldn't eat and I would have been bad off. When I did my first 24-hour, I did not eat enough, and then my stomach actually crashed on me. My
mm,
stomach made me stop that first year, because it was like screaming at me at 2 a.m. What are you doing awake, and why aren't you feeding me? You know, I don't know what to do. So but it's really something you have to learn. I mean, I have I've had a love-hate relationship with food. So I have a lot of experience with, trying things out and finding what does work and what doesn't work for me, and knowing what foods I need at different times and different feelings. But when you're running, that really all kind of goes out the window, because I mean, like you said, you're burning so many calories, you cannot possibly replace them. One of the best things I ever read was saying that, there's no way during a race to properly hydrate and fuel. You can't do it. You're burning
mm,
calories too fast. It's not a matter of replenishing it, it's a matter of giving yourself enough. There's actually a lot of people who have drank too much water and not ate enough during races, and they get very sick from it. I mean, you can actually, your kidneys can shut down if you give them too much water without food, because you basically drown your kidneys. I forget
mm.
what it's called. It's like hydro something, hypo something. I don't know. But anyway, so
Hyperhydrated or something like that.
yeah, it's like a word for kidneys. I
Mm,
don't know. There's all these technical words that I read over. I'm like, that's that thing. That's a kidney thing. um, but I mean, if you read, like, there's a lot. When people die from doing these crazy races, they don't die from physical pain. They die from some kind of internal thing. And a lot of it has to do with the food and things they're not eating. And honestly, just the lack of. It's not just a matter of what you're eating during, what you ate before, and, sleeping. So you had to sleep before, which is so hard. I mean, if you've done marathons, so the night before a race, you're always like jittery and not sleeping, like it's like Christmas for a kid.
yeah.
So during the race though, it's I've learned what works for me, and I could tell you my exact plan. And I can tell you what I have learned doesn't work. But I will also tell you that there are some crazy, crazy ultra runners out there. And when I say crazy, I mean, you would not believe the things they eat during their run. I ran with a guy in Michigan that ate cheeseburgers, McDonald's cheeseburgers during his run. No joke. That was like his go-to fuel. You know what he ate for breakfast? A McDonald's breakfast burrito. And you would never know it looking at this guy. It's really cool when you run ultras, because ultras are the only kind of race where anyone will talk to you during the race. When you
Mm,
run a marathon, you'll get to a couple people that will talk, but a lot of people are like so in the zone, or got their headphones on, or like they're worried about their PR, they're worried about their this, that they're not as open. And that's one of the reasons I really fell in love with ultras is from Pemberton. I learned that. I mean, I talked to so many people and you make friends at these races. I mean, in Michigan, I ran with like 6 different people at different times and learned all kinds of stuff about them. I mean, from the matter of how they fuel and eat and what runs they've done to the matter of like their family life and everything else, and it's just cool to hear all the different perspectives, but you'd be surprised some of the foods that these people eat. And so during the Pemberton race, like they put out all kinds of different food. People will eat pizza and cupcakes and all kinds of stuff. And I've experimented with some of this stuff, but there's a very fine line for my stomach as far as sugar goes. I did eat a couple the mini airheads during this ultra that saved me at certain times, just like you need that little sugar boost. But I didn't have many of my gels. I usually during a marathon, I take 3 GUs, like the GU gels. I only used, I think, 2 of them during the whole ultra because they're a little weird on my stomach. And I know that. So when I trained, I'd practiced a method of a gel and then something to eat. So every hour I would alternate. I'd have a gel 1 hour and then something to eat the next hour and then a gel and then something to eat and just little things to eat. But then when like you were saying, when I was doing it for whole days, I was just kind of eating safe. So like eating clean. I wasn't eating a ton of food during the day, but I'd eat my power breakfast, which is a bagel with peanut butter and banana. That's my pre-race, any race breakfast. And that can sustain me. I know that can sustain me for 5 hours, but I didn't let myself just depend on that during my 100-mile race. I kept eating. So my goal during the 100-miler was to eat early. If I ate enough before I got to the 75-mile mark, I knew I'd be fine. And so that was my big goal, was to make sure I kept to that schedule where I was eating something every hour. So every hour on the hour, I would either have some kind of electrolyte or energy gel or something, kind of like a runner kind of food. And then next hour I would eat something actual food wise. But when I was training and having, runs and then stuff in between, I would eat a normal lunch, like a sandwich or something. I just wouldn't eat a bunch of grease, wouldn't eat a bunch of vegetables because you don't want that running through you. Very safe on the fruit. I eat fruit during my ultra. So I eat berries, blueberries, and strawberries. I found like just a little handful are good. That's one of the things that I learned from Pemberton because it was like, it saved me because it's also hydration too when you're eating fruit like that. Bacon is like my favorite running food of all time. They were laughing at me in Michigan because I made my bacon here in Maryland, packed it in my suitcase, and I had it in little Ziploc bags. And so after like 30 miles, I got my bacon and I ate bacon and I had bacon in my pocket. And so one of the guys was struggling. I was like, here, have a piece of bacon. And he's like, what? Like you just pulled bacon out of your pocket. But I mean, think about it. It's all that salt and it's easy on your stomach, So I ate some bacon. I shared some bacon and that's the other thing during a 100-mile. Don't be afraid to ask anyone else for other things. Cause like people bring extra stuff all the time. And I actually read that in the Ryan Hall book. Ryan Hall is the Olympic marathon record holder. And he wrote in the book that he wrote, he said, when you're hurting during a race, if you help somebody else, it's amazing how much it affects you. And It's just it's that running community where you just feel good and you forget your problems for a second because you're helping somebody else.
Yeah.
And so, I did have extra food with me during my run with my crew. And there was a few different people that we helped out and shared stuff with because there's people that run on crude or there's people who don't realize what they need because they didn't think about that aspect of training or didn't get to that point where they needed to.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, bacon, pickles at the aid stations, they almost always have pickles or pickle juice. And I definitely go to the pickle juice, which this is Jaden. Go get your tablet. But and actually funny story about pickle juice. If you ever see like a yellow looking juice that might be Gatorade or might be pickle juice, ask before you drink it.
Yeah.
Because you'd be surprised. So at Pemberton one year, there's pickle juice out on the table, and this guy like finishes the run, and you could see he's like he needs something. He chugs this Gatorade and spit it out like everywhere, and yells really loudly, "Is that pee?" because he wasn't expecting Gatorade. I mean, he was expecting Gatorade, not pickle juice. I mean, think about that. Pickle juice is salty. It probably does taste like pee.
Well, I was
Like,
going
oh,
to say,
pickle.
I'm not picking
And
up a jar of anything yellow and drinking it before I'm asking what it is,
right.
regardless.
But the pickle juice is wonderful. And chicken broth. I actually take chicken broth with me. And that was another thing that I learned from Pemberton. Having it hot there was wonderful because it's cold. And in December, that's a good idea. Like get a thermos and put chicken broth in it because as salty as it is, and then it also has, so much nutrients in it. It sounds weird, but it is actually, it tastes so good when you're at that point.
Yeah. It's tasting pretty good thinking about it, actually. So how did you, so you brought all this, like you brought all your supplies for food and you had it with your crew, or
Yeah.
was there a fair amount of it at the aid stations? How did that look?
So that's something to look into for the races. Different races have more. I've been reading actually more because I'm adding to my calendar. So I've been doing more research and it's pretty some of them are pretty vague, but some of them are really, if they have good aid stations, you'll know they have good aid stations from their descriptions or from people who have done the race before. The aid stations had, like I said, they had candy. That's where I got the candy from. And they had chips, which that is good too. I ate a couple of tortilla chips. They have like the gels and Gatorade. Weird. They have soda, which is only a thing at ultras. Marathons, there's never soda, but they had soda like Coca-Cola and Dr. Pepper. I'm like, and actually one of the guys that ran with me this time kept drinking Red Bull. I mean, it was insane to me how much Red Bull he was drinking. And I took a couple caffeine pills. I think like 3 caffeine pills, but I have a low dose. It's a low dose electrolyte caffeine pill. So it's got magnesium, potassium, and caffeine in it, just a little bit. And that did like that because you don't really notice that you're getting tired, but you feel like you're starting to kind of get like slow mentally. And that's when I would take that. And that helped. And like the gels have caffeine in them. But so they had those and they had some granola bars and they actually had cup noodles at this race that I just did, which that's chicken broth there. So if they have cup noodles or anything like that, I mean, you can always drink that out there. I don't know if I'd be eating the vegetables that are in it.
Plus the carbs of the noodles, right?
Right. But they have a good amount at most aid stations, but you always want to pack your own stuff. You don't want to rely on that. So, I mean, like I said, I had my bacon and my broth and I took wraps. I made just a tortilla with turkey, like a little roll up because like I said, my stomach can be sensitive, but I know I needed something a little bit substantial. So I made some turkey wraps and you have a crew. So like the race that you're running is a loop. I was looking at that. Those are nice because like you could have stuff wherever you're looping back through, or a lot of races have drop bags. So you can have stuff in your drop bags. This race, you could have your crew pretty much the whole time. I've done a lot of research to find runs that you can have a crew because it's not just necessarily like having the food and all, but also having changes of clothes and socks. Right. Because you definitely want to try to keep your feet dry. I have a powder that I put on my feet, and I actually made it out of this ultra with only one tiny blister, which is incredible because like my marathon, I had like 8 disgusting blisters, but I never changed my socks. But I, again, made a plan and I stuck to it. I changed my socks so many times, changed my clothes sometimes. I mean, especially if it's cold, just changing your clothes is such a big refresher because you'll be dry for a minute and feel better. And so that having a crew close by or somewhere is nice because they have all that stuff. So my crew for this race, it was a friend of mine. My husband couldn't go because our daughter had her dance recital. So my friend went with me and we rented a car and she pretty much stayed with us. Like they call it leapfrogging. So she would like drive 5-10 miles and meet me up the road. And then she would drive, to the next aid station and meet me there. There was a couple times where she couldn't get to me. So if there's any time where we're like on a trail in the woods, there was the last 10 miles, nobody could get to you, which was kind of a weird time. But at the same time, you just kind of get it done at that point. Doesn't really matter what you have. But most of the runs, the ultras that are done on the road, they can be crewed pretty easily. Some of those ones in the woods aren't as easily crewed. So that's something that you read into and kind of prepare for. I mean, I also carried stuff with me a lot. So I would see her. I mean, at the beginning, I didn't see her. I told her, let me go for 20 miles. I'll see you in 20 miles. And then after that, I was like, okay, I got another 10, 15 miles in me. Actually sent her to the store to get me beer because nothing was quenching my thirst. I took a sip of this beer and it was like magic. Okay, that's all I needed. And I've seen people do that. So that's why I was like, you know what? I need this. It was hot at the beginning. It's hot. And I just could not, like, something wasn't clicking. And I was like, I need something other than water. My hydration drink wasn't working. So I said, just go get any kind of beer that like got citrus in it. And I took a sip of it and gave it to her. I said, okay, that's all I needed. Bye. And she was like, are you kidding? And I was like, no, like, I think that's what I need. Something was telling me, and I've never done that during my training. It just occurred to me that's what I needed. And it worked. Like I said, I've seen people, I saw a guy take a shot of whiskey at mile 75. I was like, like there are the craziest things you will see.
And well, I think that goes to your point about how mental it is, because it's probably nothing. It's probably a lot of mental satisfaction of some sort, right? It's obviously when you're drinking whiskey, it's poison, to your body. So
right.
It's obviously not benefiting you, but mentally, maybe it's taking an edge off, maybe whatever it's doing. But I
mean,
yeah,
it's really at that point something I didn't think I needed. Like
sure.
I had all these things planned and it was just something I didn't plan. So it was like, I needed something other than what I had. It's kind of like that, that age old thing that we always want what we don't have. So, you wanted something. So luckily my crew was there to help me.
And I learned that same lesson after, because I ran the Marine Corps Marathon 6 times, but I walked away from the first one with a lot of those same lessons that, like, I got finished. It was something like 4:30 or something like that. And I remember when I got finished, I was like, oh, I could do so much better, but I need you to meet me at mile 11, mile 17, mile 21. And like you said, give me fresh socks, give me a fresh shirt, give me a banana, whatever. Like, and that's what I did the second time. And I shaved an hour off my time because I just had that strategic plan ahead of time. I had no idea what I was getting myself into other than a 16-week kind of training plan the first time. But then the second time, having been there, I was like, oh, I almost walked away from that race going, yep, I need this, and was just kind of queued up for next time. So, I mean, it is a bit of a team sport in that regard, right? Like having your crew there, like giving you what you need. I'm listening right now while I'm running and training to Cameron Haynes' book called Endure. And he talks about different pacers and stuff like that, or people running with you at different legs, just, family members jumping in at hard parts that actually run alongside you for, different types of, again, mental, support even. So yeah, having a crew, having a game plan is really important.
Well, it's funny what you said about the Pacers thing, because I'm reading a book now. It's called Born to Run. It's about the first ultra marathon, and it's a really good book so far. But it was talking about the importance of pacers during a 100-miler, because at the end you can get so tired that you start hallucinating. And there has been some serious hallucinations that have people could have seriously gotten harmed if they didn't have a pacer there to kind of keep them sane. So that's one of the things that they say pacers are good for, especially later on in those races, is, just kind of making sure, like you said, you're mentally clear.
What has all this done for you mentally, right? Obviously physically you're probably in great shape and all that, but as far as mentally, how have you grown, having transitioned into kind of this long distance running lifestyle? What's that done for you there?
I mean, it's weird because it's like the chicken and the egg. You don't know which one comes first. I think I was always very mentally driven and mentally, I don't know, I'm very reflective, and I am very intuitive. My mind's always going. And running has kind of given me a break, actually, from my mind going, and put it into good use. So my mind is constantly going when I'm running. People always do you listen to music? I don't listen to music very often when I run. Sometimes I do now. I do less than I used to. But then I'll say, well, what do you think about? I don't really always know. Sometimes I'm thinking about the run. Sometimes I'm thinking about, the day, but it really helps me kind of debrief my day too. So when I'm having a hard time at work or a hard time, with kids or something, if I go run, it just like totally relaxes me. And it's a matter of, I have a thought, I dismiss a thought. It's like it's meditation almost. It's moving meditation where I'm going and it gives me clarity. And that's why when I'm not running, it's actually been a tough thing. So they say like you don't know what comes first, the chicken and the egg, because like I don't know that running has made me clearer, or if because I needed that clarity I started running. I don't know. I mean, I started running because I was stressed, and I was running to relieve stress. And then I realized that not only did it relieve stress, but it made me feel better in other ways. And so then it was, I don't know, it's a odd thing to think that running has changed me mentally, because I don't know that it's changed me as much as it's just kind of like polished, fine, like made me realize that I can, like, I don't know. I can I can be productive in my thoughts, I guess. And so I mean, like I'll run and write papers. So I'm national board certified. And when I got my national board certification, I wrote my papers while I was running. I would dream them all up when I was running, get home, start typing, and get it done. And it's like, so it's when I do my thinking. It's when I also clear my mind though. So it's very, but ultimately I think it's really just made me realize that, I can do anything. And I think that's the biggest thing about running, is that I enjoy running because it never stops proving to me the things that I can do more than I thought I could do. I can be faster than I thought I could be. I never, ever thought that I could run a mile in less than 7 minutes. And I have done it now. Like that is huge to me, because there was never a time where I was like, shoot, in college, in high school, I was finishing miles at like 11 minutes. And now I'm like, oh, 7 minute mile. Yeah, I got that now. I worked hard at that. And it's a matter of, and that's really ultimately it. The reason I love running so much is because you get from it what you put in, like it's not everything in life is like that. Unfortunately, you can work at something and put something, work into it, and it doesn't always give back, but running does. And not just physically, but also like you said, mentally and emotionally. So when I'm not running, I have like these moments where I'm just like, I need to run. And I found some other things. I ride the bike some, and I started strength training about 2 years ago, pretty adamantly, because I realized how important that was, avoiding injuries and things. So those things help too. It's not nearly the same as running, but it's all part of the big picture, really. And it's a matter of like using our bodies. Our bodies are our bodies to do is, and like I get kind of depressed sometimes where I see people and I'm like, oh my gosh, you could do wonderful things, and you're sitting there like on the TV, or like it's a matter of just like letting your mind tell your body to do what it can do.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
And your friend Greg, who pointed me in your direction, like we were running one day, and like he just jumped back in with me, and I just jumped back into running because I haven't ran in a bit. I started running again last month. We were doing a month of Murphs, and but we were running, and he came out, and he was really getting back into it too, and he was talking about like being hurting from sore or whatever from the day before, and I was like, hey man, now's the time to tell your body like this is how it's going now, right? Like you're not hurt, like it, but it's time to start telling your body and mind like, hey, this is how we're rolling now. Not to don't give into it. Go ahead and push through, because that's really what it takes. It's kind of like takes, like you said earlier, like your mind's going to lie to you and tell you you're done, or you can't do anymore, or whatever. And you got to set the bar, and you've got to tell it. I remember that day I was explaining to him, I said, I almost feel like your mind is in survival mode. It's telling you like, this sucks. You got to quit. You're hurting yourself, whatever. It's trying to survive. But once you push through and you let your mind and body know, like, no, this is this is the thing. This is what we're
Mhm.
doing now. I feel like it shifts from survival mode, and it's still survival mode, but it's survival to meet the new demands that you're putting on yourself, if that makes sense, right? So the first one is trying to
Absolutely.
avoid it, and the other is, oh, okay, in order to survive, I have to level up here, and that was the point. Like, hey, you got to push through that to tell your body, like, no, this is our new level now, and this is what you need to adapt to.
Right. Well, and that's, I mean, and that's, you said it right then. Like, your mind is in protection mode, and I mean, that's 100% right. Your mind will stop you anytime you're going to do something physically damaging way before you're there, because your mind is trying to make sure everything is good. But ultimately, our bodies are really in control. There's you were talking about earlier, the book Endure that you're reading. There's another book called Endure by Alex Hutchinson, which goes into that entire conversation that you're starting there with. Really, our limits are way more than we realize. And what he talks about in that book is how we can push our bodies way past what we think. I mean, he talks about everywhere from people running these crazy amounts and not eating and not drinking, to like the deep divers that are going way down into the ocean without any kind of breathing apparatus, or people who are climbing these mountains or surviving intense cold. And, you know, your mind will tell you to stop way before. And what he says in the book is, like, pain is in your mind, you know, quitting is in your mind. And that's one of the things. So I've had plenty of friends like, I want to run with you, or I want you to train me to run. And I've had some wonderful experience with that. Actually, I think it was like my 8th marathon. A coworker came up to me and said, I just turned 50. I want to run a marathon, or I'm about to turn 50 or something. She wanted to run a marathon. And I ran it with her and paced her. And it was my slowest marathon, but it was probably one of my most rewarding experiences, because just to see her push through it and I pushed through it with her. And like, it was a totally different experience than me just running. But in the same breath, I've had experiences where I've been training with friends or trying to help them, and it's constantly, they're like, I just can't do this. I had to stop. And I've looked at them, and I mean, sometimes I sound mean, but I'm like, why did you stop? Well, I just couldn't go anymore. Why? What couldn't go anymore? Were you out of breath? Jaden, stop. Were you out of breath? Were you going to throw up? I was like, because I've never been to a point where I literally felt like I could not go anymore. I don't know what that would feel like. I mean, I've felt tired. Yes, my legs have hurt. You know, my stomach's hurt. But there's never been a point where I'm like, nope, cannot move anymore. I don't know that exists. I don't know that people have gotten there, and people are like, oh, I couldn't go anymore. No, you stopped. But what made you stop? And then if it's that, okay, well, did you try to push through it? You know, and that's my number one rule when people tell me, you know, they're having aches and pains, is if something starts hurting, run faster. Run faster for a minute. If it's still hurting, run slower for a minute. If it's still hurting after 2 minutes, one of running faster, one of running slower, okay, maybe you should stop and evaluate it. But I bet you it won't keep hurting, because whatever's hurting is typically from some kind of motion that is repetitive. And if you speed up, you start to tweak that motion a little bit, it helps it. Or if you slow down, it tweaks that motion a little bit and it helps it. Or it's in your head. And when you start thinking, I got to run faster, your mind is now distracted by your pain and thinking more about your pace. And you're going to trick yourself really into getting over it. Because I mean, it's our minds are horrible things or wonderful things, whatever we let them be, you know?
Yeah. Have you listened or read David Goggins at all?
Yes. And so one of the books I just read he wrote the foreword to it. It's called Embrace the Suck. But the other David Goggins one of my good friends who's a runner, who's ran Pemberton with me, she's reading it now. And she's like, I'm passing this book on to you next. You're going to love it.
Goggins' actual book, Can't Hurt Me.
Yes, that's the one she's got now. Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of his things. He says, is like, when we are ready to quit, we're only at 40% of what our capabilities are, and because he's, he ran in his book, he talks about, he ran 100-miler every weekend. He was recruiting for the Navy at the time, and he was like running back-to-back ultras every weekend when he was like recruiting or something crazy like that. But he just realized it was like, once he broke through the mental barriers and realized, like, all the adversity is truly just mental, and that was it,
Mhm.
and then it was just, but he talks about just, our mind is our own worst enemy. It knows all our secrets. It knows all of our weaknesses. It knows exactly what to say to mess with us. Right. Like, and,
Mhm.
he's like, just talks about that war in your head, which to this point, is that. And it was funny, I guess for the group, like we were on the emails before, one of the pre-screen is like topics to avoid, and you're like, excuses and quitters, and I'm like, we don't want to talk about excuses and quitters. Like, what do you mean?
Well, it's just because sometimes I feel bad because I'm very kind of mean about it. And like, even my high school kids, like, they'll come in there complaining about something. And I'm like, look, like, you have nothing to complain about. And I don't show any pity. I mean, it was one of the reasons that I coached for a few years and I couldn't do it anymore because they're like whiny and the excuses. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, no, you are not at your end. Like, yes, you can push harder. And, it's one of those things where, especially being a teacher or a coach, I know like you're supposed to be a little bit more, I don't know, not coddling, but a little more understanding. And I'm not. I'm just like, no, there's no way you are capable of more. If you don't tell yourself you're capable of more, that's that. I mean, and that's the thing. And I think that's why, like, I've taken on so much with my goals of running, and like I push myself so much and I'm never satisfied. So like you could talk to people who will be like, yeah, like she's great, but she doesn't know. Like I get done a race and the first thing I'm like, okay, this is the next goal. Like this is my next plan. Like it's one thing to the next. And but it's a matter of like, that's because I know after it, like, okay, that was good. I felt good. I'm proud of that, but I can still do more. And that's what drives me nuts about other people that, are making excuses and everything else all the time. I'm like, you don't have it. You just don't have that drive. Just admit that. And that's that.
Yep.
Because if you don't, there's nothing anyone can do to give you that.
Right.
I mean, and that goes as far as anything with life. I mean, same thing with learning math. Like they come in, they're like, I don't know how to do math. I'm not going to I can't do math. My parents don't do math. I don't do math. No, you right there have made a decision not to do math. If you want to change your mind and say you're going to do math, then we can start now and we can try. But I cannot change your mind. That's yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, 100%. And that's, recently I've been talking to people about, setting goal setting through the goal, like, running a marathon so that what, like running so that what, like what's the beyond, in other words, the
Mhm.
why. But I always kind of like to call it the so that, like, you want to run so that what, so that, because it's kind of goal setting through the finish line, right? Like if I
Mhm.
finish this 100 miler, what does that mean? And it's that, I think that, I think people like to say like they want certain things, but they don't mean it. They just want to be able to say it.
Mhm.
And then it's the low hanging fruit excuses that come. It's like, oh yeah, my knee, I tweaked my knee. It's like, well, who said you tweaked your knee? Like you went to the doctor? No, I didn't go to the doctor, but yeah, my knee,
Google.
it's really messed up. Like, well, how do you know it's messed up? Like, and it's just, it is a mindset thing. It's the easy excuse that falls in the lap to get them off the hook, right? They didn't quit. Their knee hurt. They
Right.
hurt their knee. And it's just like, how do you know? Like, how do you know you hurt yourself? And it is just that. And that's why I appreciate this conversation around, like, look, we really have to own our minds. And look, do I say we need to go out and act stupidly and do dumb things and not train at all? No.
Right.
I've seen that. I've seen, my Marine Corps buddy, he like cold turkeys, like half marathons and stuff like that. I'm like, man, I don't know that I could cold turkey a run. I wouldn't. But like, cause I think those are high risk moments, right? Like that's when you're like
Right.
really kind of, putting yourself at risk. But if you're strategic and you really want it, you'll find a way. Like the things we really want, like we are going to find a way to get it done. But if we don't really want it, we're going to find a way out of it, and something like
Right.
these
Yes.
runs and races are a good indicator of such things.
Well, and like you said, it's a matter of when you have that goal, it's not just I hope this is going to happen to me. It's I'm going to make this happen. And that's the thing that comes with idea of, do you take the excuse or do you overcome it, is a matter of, you have a plan to get to that goal. It's not a dream. It's a goal because you're working towards it. And that there's a big difference between a dream and a goal. And unfortunately, it requires work, you know? And I mean, now on the other side of that too, overtraining is a very, very risky thing. And I know that from experience, unfortunately. And will tell you that there's there's a fine line between pushing through a pain and an injury and not listening to your body. So it's a matter of figuring out what's your body and what's your mind. And like I said earlier, your body is ultimately the one that really you should be listening to, but our mind tries to take over. And so listening to your body is an art. It's something that not many people can do. And people who can do it, you will know. And it's impressive. I mean, as far as I knew the day my daughter was going to be born 3 months before. Ask my husband. I told him the day. It was a week before her due date. I literally went into labor that day without any, I did not make it happen. But I mean, I've had other things that have happened to me physically that, I know something is not right. And I'll go to the doctor and I'm like, and doctors don't know. I'm like, something is not right. And they're just kind of looking at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, look, trust me. I know my body. It's like, this is not normal. And, I had COVID twice, and I knew when I had COVID, this is the time. Okay, wait, this is not just another cold. I need to listen to my body. Something's not right. And, it's one of those things where you have to be willing to push through some pain, but also willing to succumb to some of it. And realize, okay, now I didn't do that. And that's how I broke my foot. And then, unfortunately, if you don't listen to your body, it will make you listen if you push it too hard. But, all of that too comes down to, it's not just about training in the gym. It's not just about training on the miles. It's about nutrition too. If you have to eat right for that workload you're putting on your body.
Yeah, I agree. So, I guess yeah, even more important. I guess to bring it home here, selfishly, I'm going to ask: if someone who wants to run a 100-miler, what do they need to know to be successful? If you could sum it up.
Well, be prepared for a long day. It's really a long day. I mean, that's how you really have to think about it. Like I said, have a plan and stick to it. You're going to start running and want to change your plan about everything, but don't, because at that point, your mind is over calculating. Your mind is trying to take over, and you shouldn't let it do that, because you've already planned in a good state of mind. So, plan your nutrition, plan your clothes, probably even plan a bathroom break, because that's a weird part of it that I haven't necessarily figured out if it's important or not, but I only peed once during this 100-mile race. And then at mile 95, I had to go so bad. And it was the strangest feeling in the world. And I mean, I just popped a squat on the side of the trail. It's dark. Nobody sees me, but it's just a weird thing that I wonder if that doesn't have something else. I mean, because ultimately you should be not just not going to the bathroom necessarily to filter out or to get water out, but to filter out, because your kidneys are working while you're running, and you want to get rid of that. And the only way you can do that is by going to the bathroom. So that's one of the things that might be smart to plan too, but plan those kinds of things. And now at the same time, don't get so caught up if something in your plan doesn't go right. Have a plan, do your best to stick to it, but if it doesn't, let it go. But I think the most important thing is just trust yourself. Don't second guess. If you think you need something now, get it now. And if it's a matter of taking a second to retie your shoes, retie your shoe. There's a lot of little tiny decisions that could make a big difference. And if you're going to sit there and get caught up in that decision, then it's going to make it mess you up more. So, just have a plan, stick to the plan. If it goes a little wrong, let it go. Walk. One big thing that you don't really think about is actually the practice of walking, because you're going to walk. Yeah, sure, there are people who run the whole time, but you're going to walk. And it feels good to walk, honestly. In between a couple miles, little bit of walk here and there. After about mile 50, I started a game plan of running 3 miles and walking half miles in between. So I would like run a mile, walk a half mile, run a mile, maybe a quarter mile and a quarter, walk a half mile. But I was like walking half miles at a time. And it really kind of helped my joints kind of like get a break, and like almost like I was greasing my joints or something. It felt good to walk. I never sat down. I sat down one time to tie my shoes. I sat down once to pee. I'm a firm believer that when you sit down, it's harder. That's from Pemberton, that like sitting down is not the best. If you can keep moving, I mean, get your sandwich and start walking down the road with it. Just keep moving. I mean, it hurts more to stop. And at that point, you can need to like do some stretching, which isn't a bad idea to stretch in between too. But there are people who try to sleep in between. I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, you think
Like
about it, your
sleep during
body's
a
in
run?
overdrive. Yeah. I don't know. But like I said, I mean, eat early, eat when you're not hungry, because you won't be hungry. But if you wait till late, it's too late. Take other things to drink than water, like hydration, Gatorade, if that's what you're used to, like things that don't try something new on race day unless it's like a chip, because I've heard horror stories of that. And have a ton of clothes. Like it's better to have more. That's the number one piece of advice there. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. If you possibly might need a pair of gloves, have it. If you possibly might need a hat or a poncho or an extra light or an extra pair or extra set of batteries, have it. Because if you have it when you need it, it's going to be that one little reassurance that like, yes, that's what I need. If you don't have it, you're going to beat yourself up over it and just totally get in your own head. I had tons of stuff I didn't need. I had probably 3 extra outfits, but the fact of having it gives you that peace of mind. And then that option of having it has rained during every long run I've done. Be prepared for rain. It's okay. Go run in the rain to practice. I mean, I did 75 hard, so I ran in the rain, snow, and everything. Like the weather's weather to me. Be prepared for that, though. I mean, don't be expecting and stalking the weather conditions. Like people get so caught up in, oh man, it's gonna be this. No, don't. Just let it be. The weather is just another element. It's not gonna make or break you. Small steps. Don't try to like overachieve and make long steps, because that's when you get hurt. But really, when it comes down to it, have fun. I mean, like that is the number one thing with the ultra versus a marathon, is it's fun. It is weird. Not everyone does it. The group of people that do it are friendly. The people that come and watch are friendly. It's a totally different experience because not everyone does it. And just enjoy the fact that you took. I mean, I talked to people during this run that they started 50 mile like halfway through, and people at the 50 milers passing, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, you're doing wonderful." And I was like, "You guys are too." And they're like, "Dude, like you passed us. We started 6 hours after you, and we're only doing a 50 mile." And I was like, you made it out here. Like just showing up to start a race like that is awesome. Half the people in this, no, more than half, 80% of the people in this world wouldn't even dare to try that. So, you got to give yourself that credit right away and just have fun, talk to people, laugh at stupid things. If you start hallucinating, laugh at it. I don't know that I hallucinated. Apparently everybody does at the end of the race. I will tell you, I saw some weird things in the last 10 miles, but I think they actually were things. Everyone laughs at me, but I laughed at it too. Like I had to laugh at it and joke. I mean, I saw that you're in nature. So whether you're in the woods or you're on a trail, like enjoy your scenery. I saw animals and plants I hadn't seen before. And like, you just take a second to look at them, laugh. I got so close to these deer. It was like, it's cool. Appreciate that. Cause there are people who never get to see that.
Was your 100 miler, was it a trail run or?
No, it was a road run. It was on some trails. So there was 2 sections of like the one I think was like 5 miles and the other one was about 10 miles, like on a trail that was in the woods, but it was a paved trail. We were on asphalt most of the time. And that's the thing too. Be prepared for the type of ground you're on. I found that race because I like to run on asphalt. I have ran on trails, and I know there's a lot of people out there that preach that we should run on trails instead, like wooded trails, because it's better on us. It's more giving.
Sure.
I will preach that you should run asphalt over concrete, because actually physically asphalt is less. I don't even can't think of the term for it. Concrete is harder, basically.
I've learned that.
Concrete,
I got plantar fasciitis when I was running a lot, and I figured it out. It was when I ran on the sidewalks through town, because I was, putting up the miles and running around here, and you can choose to be on the sidewalk, you can choose to be on the asphalt. And I recognized when I ran on the concrete, my feet hurt, and when I ran on the asphalt, it didn't. I was like, oh yeah, well, no kidding, because concrete's harder than asphalt. Asphalt's more giving on. Doesn't take as much of the pounding.
Yeah, I learned that in college when I got shin splints, and my college trainer was like, where are you running? And that's exactly what he told me. And so now, people cuss you. You'll be running down the road on the asphalt, and then people are like, get on the sidewalk. You're like, you don't understand. You know what? Worry about your own self. but that is the thing too. Anytime you do a road race, so even this road ultra, be prepared for some sidewalk. That used to get in my head. I used to prohibit marathons, like my favorite marathon. But the first year I did it, I was mad because you run on concrete some. And now I just got it out of my mind that I'm like, it's okay if I run on concrete for this big of a space or whatever it is, half a mile. But this ultra that I did had a little bit of sidewalk space, and I didn't let it get in my head. I did a lot of the time on the sidewalk. I ran in the grass next to it, but I didn't let it worry me too much. But if you're going to have a run that's not on asphalt, that's in the woods, you got to practice that, because the wobbling of your ankles is a totally different ball game. I mean, after I did Pemberton, my ankles were swollen for 3 days, and they weren't sore. Nothing was hurt for them. It was just that, all that wear and tear on your ankles. My body was like, "Whoo, let's go protect her ankles. We don't know what she's doing to us." I mean, and there was a lot of people that had twisted ankles and everything else. It's a different technical challenge, but it's something that you can prepare for. I mean, there's not many nice wooded trails around, but there's enough. And doing them at night's another thing, because it's a whole nother ball game. Like when I ran that trail run, I don't just have my headlamp on. I have one on my stomach too that aims the ground more, because you want your headlight to be out further so that you can see what you're coming up to. But then you want something closer to your feet so that if you see something last minute, you can see it. So it's also, it's all those little technical things that you don't want to leave until race day to experience.
Yeah.
Even though they're not going to be the same, you can at least alleviate that brand new feeling. But yeah,
that makes sense. It's illuminating your peripheral, right? Because you're running, but your peripheral is still kind of seeing what's going on. So even though you're not looking at where you're stepping, you are looking where you're stepping. I've just kind of noticed that running. I don't need to look down at where I'm stepping. It just kind of happens, that peripheral vision is just kind of processing it for me. I don't need to think about it.
It's almost like you're fast forwards, you're looking ahead so far and your mind doesn't see it until it's right there. Well, and that's another thing with having a pacer at night. It would be so beneficial, especially if it is your first trail run at night. It's probably beneficial to have someone in those night hours, because just having a second light makes a huge difference. I mean, that was one thing at Pemberton the first year. I always ran with somebody at night. And when I was by myself, it was totally different. It's a totally different feeling for so many reasons. So having somebody with you, if that's something you're considering, at night's probably the most important, just for the aspect of them having lights. But if you don't, also buddying up with a runner. I mean, like I said, there was plenty of times I was running with different people. And there might be a time where you might need to slow down to run with somebody a little bit. But chances are, if you were sticking with them for a good part of the race, if you're slowing down with them for a little bit, later on, they're going to be slowing down with you, or vice versa. You kind of go back and forth. There was somebody I ran with this last race, for a while, he would race ahead, then I'd pass him, then he'd race it back. And we kind of kept back and forth, but it was almost like we were feeding off each other's energy, where you see somebody pulling ahead, you're like, oh, I can do that. And then you get up there and you're like, okay, we're at a good pace. Let's slow down a minute. And then one of you be like, nope, I feel good. I'm going to go. And it's kind of one of those things where you'll find somebody that's kind of you can feel that dynamic with and go with it. But at the same time, don't try to rush to keep up with somebody, because then, it's definitely not I'm not a huge believer in conserving energy. There's a lot of people like, especially with marathons, like, oh, you don't want to come out too fast. I've done that. I've tried that. I think it gets in your head more than you need to. Like, if you feel good, use it. If you're feeling good and you can run, keep running. Your body's going to make you stop eventually. If you get in your head and you like say, oh, I need to slow down, you're like so preoccupied by all of that it's like ultimately gonna slow you down.
Yeah, it's kind of like just flow, just flow with
Right.
it. Be
Let
strategic,
it
but
go.
just flow. Like, yeah, just cool. Well, what are you working on now? What's your next thing?
So I have a marathon in Maine in October that was supposed to be last year, and it got COVID canceled. But that's going to be really hilly marathon. That's going to be more of a scenic marathon for me. My marathon in December is my Rehoboth one. It's my favorite race. I have my best time there, but I'm trying to get at 3:30. So I've been, like I said, I've been working my pace a lot over the last 3 years. I've shaved off a lot of time, and I qualified technically for Boston, but when I was starting the qualifying time for Boston, it was 3:30. Then I got older, so my time went up to 3:35. So I'm qualified to run it, but I want to get under 3:30 still. So that's my marathon goal right now. And then I just want to keep running 100 milers. Like I now just want to do them not necessarily faster, but like more consistent. So like this run, I felt really good until like mile 85. And then I was like really, really digging deep, and not necessarily like, it wasn't physical. It was mental at that point. I was just very like, like should I be running? Shouldn't be running. Like I was like getting, all kind of in my head. And I was like, so next I'm like, I just want to feel more consistent the whole time. So next 100 miler, I want to just feel better at mile 90, and then after that, feel better until mile 95. And, I really did truly think at like mile 70, I would remember thinking, oh, I'm good. If I get to this time, I get to mile 90 at this time, I'm just going to bust those last 10 miles out. I'll run those last 10 miles. I'm going to feel good. I'm just going to go on adrenaline. No, don't expect that, because at the last 10 miles, like, it's just like, yes, like you're ready to get it done and you're like, oh, the end is in sight. 10 miles out of 100, it sounds like it's easy, but then you're also just to the point where like your body is now starting to say like, okay, no, this is tired or this is hurt. And if you slow down, different tired, different hurt, and you speed up, and then you're like, okay, but let me just like, it's like you start to almost get like you have ADHD at the end of it, where you're like, you cannot focus on just pushing through at the end. You're tired. So yes, so really the ultra goal is to do more and to feel better. And my marathon goals still get a little faster. And really, I'm trying to run every state. So I'm not like, there's a lot of people that there's like 50 and 50 where people try to do 50 miles or 50 or a marathon in every state. There's different ones, but I don't necessarily need to do a marathon every state. I just need to do a race in every state. So if I do an ultra, I technically did a marathon there too. So, but that's hard too, because then you're traveling and that's expensive, and with family, that's hard. So trying to keep it somewhat local, but I have my next ultra is in Outer Banks. And so it's a 6-hour drive to get there. So it's not too bad. Yeah. And that'll be fun trip.
Cool. Awesome. Well,
that's
anything we didn't hit on that you want to throw out there? Or are we good?
Nope. I think we got it.
Good. Awesome. Well, tons of awesome nuggets. I was taking notes. If you didn't notice, I was like, yeah, caffeine pills. Yeah, no. So, but I'll definitely.
I can send you the brand if you want.
Yeah, I definitely love to pick your brain some more.
A list. I have a list of like the products I use. And that's another thing, people, a lot of times people will do research and like read, like, these are the things to take. Like I said earlier, you have to like learn what's good for you, experiment with different things. Don't get stuck on like, I have to use this brand and do this, like try different things. People probably think I'm crazy that I like hoard stuff, but I use everything in my cabinets. I have like 8 different brands of things that I've just over the time training, like learned this is what I need at this time. This is what I need this time. And there are some things that I've had that I'm like, oh no, that does not work for me. And I give them away. I don't keep those things. I give them away to people. But, it's a matter of experimenting with those things before race day and experimenting with like one at a time. Don't try 5 things and then try to figure out which one upset your stomach or which one gave you that energy burst.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of patience.
That I can say. So good. Well, no, definitely. I'll be picking your brain tell as much as I can, just getting ready for this, but because I agree, it's going to take getting the game plan together and learning the lessons, and really, it's the things I don't know, that I was taking notes about today. Like, geez, didn't even think about that type of stuff, but yeah, good. Well, awesome. Jessica, thank you so much for coming on, especially kind of short notice and hopping on and knocking this out. I really, really do appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Let me know if you have any more questions. I really do. I love talking about it. So.
Oh yeah. I'm going to have more questions.
Also did have plantar fasciitis too. So if that ever comes back, I'm pretty sure I know the cure.
What's the cure?
Stretching.
Ooh.
All the time.
Yeah.
I do stretches every morning and every night.
Yeah.
It's
cool.
just a really
all right,
easy
good.
Stretch.
Well,
and orthotics.
Good. Awesome. Well, I will definitely be picking your brain more as we go. And again, thank you for coming on, and I'll talk to you real soon.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.